morning started like any other on Colony Ship Horizon. Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing supply reports when the emergency broadcast signal cut through every communication channel in the ship. The familiar blue and gold seal of the Galactic Empire filled every screen, followed by a voice that made her blood run cold. Citizens of the galaxy, today marks a significant victory for order and peace. The terrorist colony of New Terra, harboring 8 million human criminals, has been cleansed from existence. Let this serve as a reminder that the Empire's justice reaches all corners of space. Sarah's coffee mug shattered on the floor. New Terra. Her sister lived there. Her nephews. 8 million people. Gone. The broadcast continued with clinical detachment, showing orbital bombardment footage as if it were a weather report. Massive Empire dreadnoughts rained plasma fire on the green world below. Cities that had taken decades to build vanished in seconds. The narrator spoke of necessary action and galactic stability, while showing the death of an entire world. Around the ship, Sarah heard screams and sobs echoing through the corridors. Every human aboard had lost someone. The Empire had just announced the largest single act of genocide in recorded history with the same tone they used for trade negotiations. Sarah's hands shook as she opened a secure channel to Earth. The message would take 3 hours to reach home, but she had to warn them. The Empire wasn't just eliminating isolated colonies anymore. They were making statements. 3 hours felt like 3 years. When Earth's response finally came through, it wasn't from the usual diplomatic channels. It was Admiral Marcus Torres, head of Earth's defense fleet, speaking from the bridge of the flagship Retribution. All human colonies, ships, and outposts are to receive this message. The Galactic Empire has declared war on humanity by murdering 8 million innocent civilians. As of this moment, Earth formally declares a state of total war against the Galactic Empire and all its allies. Sarah had never seen Admiral Torres look so cold. The man was known for his diplomatic approach, always seeking peaceful solutions. Now his eyes held the promise of death. The Empire believes they can intimidate us with mass murder. They believe we will bow to their superior numbers and technology. They are wrong. Humanity has something they lack: the will to fight for every single life. They took 8 million of our people. We will take everything from them. The message included new orders that made Sarah's heart race. All human ships were to converge on rally points. Scientists were being pulled from research stations. Engineers were being reassigned to weapons development. Even civilian freighters were being retrofitted for war. The Empire had made a critical error. They assumed humans would react like every other species they had conquered, with fear, surrender, and acceptance. They didn't understand that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history as persistence hunters, following wounded prey across continents until it collapsed from exhaustion. Sarah looked at her crew roster. 57 souls aboard the Horizon. Most were miners and engineers, not soldiers. But as she watched them volunteer for combat duty without hesitation, she realized the Empire had awakened something terrible. Dr. Kim Park, the ship's chief engineer, approached with tears still wet on her face. "Captain, I've been working on modifications to our mining charges. With some adjustments, they could breach Empire hull plating." "Do it," Sarah replied without hesitation. The transformation was happening across human space. Research ships were becoming weapon platforms. Mining vessels were turning into makeshift destroyers. Even the passenger liners were being converted into troop transports. The Empire's propaganda networks were already spinning the story, claiming the humans were proving their violent nature by preparing for war. They failed to mention that they had started this war by murdering 8 million innocents. Sarah received a priority message from Captain Williams aboard the freight hauler Freedom's Dream. "Sarah, we're picking up Empire fleet movements near the Centauri sector. Looks like they're planning to hit another colony. Are we really doing this?" She didn't hesitate. "Relay these coordinates to all nearby ships. We intercept them before they reach another human world." The Freedom's Dream was a cargo hauler with exactly 0 weapons. The Horizon was a colony ship with mining equipment. Against Empire destroyers, they had no chance of survival, but they were going anyway. That was the moment Sarah understood what Admiral Torres meant. The Empire had numbers, technology, and the resources of 1,000 conquered worlds. But they had never faced an enemy that simply refused to lose. As the Horizon changed course toward the intercept coordinates, Sarah opened ship-wide communications. All hands, this is your captain. In 6 hours, we're going to engage Empire warships to protect the colony at Proxima Station. I won't lie to you, we're probably not coming back from this. She paused, looking at the faces on her screen. These people had signed up to build new worlds, not fight wars. Now they were preparing to die to save strangers. But 8 million of our people died yesterday because we weren't there to protect them. Today we make sure that doesn't happen again. Today we show the Empire what happens when you threaten humanity's children. The response was immediate and unanimous. Every single crew member volunteered for combat duty. The mining chief requested permission to ram Empire ships if their improvised weapons failed. The medical officer started preparing for battlefield surgery. The cook asked if the kitchen knives could be sharpened for boarding actions. Sarah had seen desperate last stands before, but this was different. These people weren't desperate. They were determined. They were going to fight an impossible battle against overwhelming odds, and they were doing it with smiles on their faces. The Empire had conquered hundreds of species by demonstrating the futility of resistance. They would bombard a few cities, execute some leaders, and the survivors would submit. It had worked for millennia, but humans were different. When you killed their families, they didn't surrender. They got angry. When you threatened their children, they didn't negotiate. They eliminated the threat. The Empire had just learned the difference between conquering a civilization and awakening a species of predators. As the Horizon and dozens of other human ships converged on the Centauri sector, Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The Empire wanted a demonstration of power. Humanity was about to give them one they would never forget. Commander Zekthon of the Empire's 47th Fleet had conquered 12 systems without losing a single ship. The amphibian officer prided himself on efficient pacification operations. Today's mission should have been routine. Eliminate the human. Settlement at Proxima Station as a follow-up to yesterday's successful cleansing of New Terra. His tactical display showed 18 Empire destroyers against a small mining colony with no military defenses. It should have been over in minutes. Instead, his sensors were showing something impossible. Commander, we're detecting 37 human vessels approaching our position, reported his sensor officer. Composition includes mining ships, cargo haulers, and what appears to be a luxury cruise liner. Zekthon's throat sac inflated with amusement. They're sending civilian ships against our fleet? These humans are even more primitive than our intelligence suggested. Signal all ships to prepare for target practice. What Zekthon didn't understand was that he was about to encounter humanity's greatest strength, the ability to turn anything into a weapon when sufficiently motivated. Captain Sarah Chen watched the Empire formation through her ship's modified mining sensors. 18 destroyers in a perfect military formation, exactly as the tactical manuals prescribed. The Empire had grown comfortable with their superiority. That comfort was about to cost them. All ships, this is Horizon Actual. Sarah broadcast on the human fleet frequency. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're here to send a message. Freedom's dream. Begin your approach from the asteroid field. Starlight Express. Use the debris field for cover. Everyone else, follow my lead. The human ships didn't approach in formation. They came from all directions, using every piece of cover available. Mining ships hid behind asteroids. The cruise liner Starlight Express approached from the dark side of a moon. Cargo haulers shut down all non-essential systems to minimize their sensor signatures. Commander, the human ships are not maintaining formation, reported the tactical officer. They appear to be scattered. Zekthon's confidence wavered slightly. In his experience, defeated enemies either fled or charged directly at their doom. These humans were doing neither. They were acting like predators setting up an ambush. The first shot came from the Freedom's dream. The cargo hauler had replaced its loading arms with improvised railguns built from mining equipment. The projectile wasn't sophisticated, just a tungsten rod accelerated to tremendous velocity. It punched through the destroyer dominant shields like they weren't there. Impossible. Zekthon watched his tactical display in shock. How did a cargo vessel penetrate military shielding? His weapons officer was already calculating intercepts. Sir, they're using kinetic rounds at velocities our shields weren't designed to stop. The projectiles are too small and too fast for our point defense systems. Before Zekthon could respond, The Horizon emerged from behind an asteroid and opened fire with modified mining charges. The explosive devices had been reconfigured into proximity mines that detonated in clusters around the destroyer Inevitable. The ship's shields held, but the multiple impacts overloaded the generators. All ships, focus fire on the mining vessel, Zekthon ordered. Eliminate the primary threat. 18 destroyers turned their weapons on the Horizon. The colony ship should have been vaporized instantly. Instead, something extraordinary happened. Every other human ship opened fire simultaneously, not at the destroyers, but at the space around them. The mining charges created a debris field that interfered with targeting systems. Kinetic rounds from improvised railguns forced the destroyers to maneuver defensively. Most importantly, the luxury liner Starlight Express released its entire supply of escape pods, each one broadcasting false sensor signatures and emergency beacons. Zekthon's perfect formation dissolved into chaos as his ships tried to identify real targets among hundreds of false signals. The humans had turned their numerical disadvantage into a tactical advantage by multiplying the apparent number of threats. "Sir, I'm reading weapon locks from 67 different sources," reported the sensor officer. "I can't determine which ones are actual ships." That was when the cruise liner made its move. Captain Rodriguez had evacuated all passengers hours earlier and programmed the ship's autopilot for a collision course with the Empire flagship. The Starlight Express was 3 times larger than any destroyer, and built for passenger comfort, not combat. But it was also moving at ramming speed with its engines overloaded beyond safety limits. "Emergency maneuvers," Zekthon shouted, but it was too late. The massive passenger ship slammed into the destroyer domination, and both vessels exploded in a brilliant flash that temporarily blinded sensors across the battlefield. In the confusion that followed, the human ships pressed their attack. They didn't fight like a proper military force. Instead, they fought like a pack of wolves bringing down a much larger predator. Each ship targeted different systems, creating multiple crises that the Empire crews couldn't handle simultaneously. The mining ship Persistence used its industrial equipment to literally tear chunks of armor off the destroyer Compliance. The cargo hauler New Hope had been fitted with ramming spikes made from processed asteroid metal. When its improvised weapons failed, it simply rammed the destroyer at full speed. "Commander, we're losing ships," the tactical officer reported with disbelief in his voice. "The humans are using suicide tactics." But Zekthon realized it wasn't suicide at all. It was sacrifice. Each human ship that died took out a much more valuable Empire destroyer. The humans were trading civilian vessels for military assets and somehow winning the exchange. The destroyer, Inevitable, its shields down from the earlier mine attack, found itself facing the freight hauler Determination. The cargo ship had replaced its entire cargo bay with a massive improvised bomb built from mining explosives. When it detonated against the destroyer's hull, the explosion could be seen from 3 systems away. "Sir, recommend we withdraw and call for reinforcements," suggested the weapons officer. Zekthon's throat sac deflated in defeat. He had started this battle with 18 destroyers against civilian ships. Now he had 7 destroyers left, most of them damaged, facing 12 human vessels that fought like demons. But the humans weren't done. Captain Chen's voice came over all frequencies, broadcasting in the clear so every Empire ship could hear. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Horizon. We know you can understand our language. Carry this message back to your Empire. You killed 8 million of our people. Today you learned the price of that mistake. Every time you threaten a human world, we will be there. Every time you murder our children, we will hunt you down. You started this war, but we will finish it." The surviving Empire ships began retreating, their crews terrified by an enemy that turned civilian vessels into weapons of war. They had never encountered a species that treated death in battle as an acceptable outcome, rather than a defeat to be avoided. As the Empire fleet jumped to hyperspace, the surviving human ships regrouped. They had lost 19 vessels and nearly 1,000 lives. But they had protected Proxima Station and destroyed 11 Empire destroyers with improvised weapons and civilian ships. Sarah opened communications with the colony. "Proxima Station, This is Captain Chen. Your evacuation ships can return. The immediate threat has been eliminated. The colony administrator's voice was shaking with emotion. Captain, how did you do it? How did civilian ships defeat Empire destroyers? Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the debris field where her friends had died. Because we're not civilians anymore. The Empire made sure of that when they murdered 8 million innocents. Now we're all soldiers in a war they started but can't finish. Word of the Battle of Proxima Station spread across human space within hours. The Empire had superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but they had never faced an enemy willing to turn everything into a weapon. More importantly, they had never fought a species that got stronger and more determined with each loss instead of weaker. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent her entire career studying xenobiology in peaceful research stations. 3 days ago, she had been analyzing soil samples from distant worlds. Today, she was engineering biological weapons in a hidden laboratory aboard the converted research vessel Darwin's Revenge. The transformation wasn't just happening to ships and soldiers. Every human with specialized knowledge was finding new applications for their expertise. Scientists were becoming weapons designers. Doctors were studying alien physiology for weaknesses. Even archaeologists were examining captured Empire technology for tactical advantages. The samples from the Proxima battle are fascinating, Elena told her assistant as she examined tissue from a dead Empire soldier. Their respiratory system is completely dependent on a specific atmospheric mixture. A simple chemical agent could incapacitate entire ship crews without permanent damage. Her assistant, Dr. James Park, looked up from his microscope. Are we really going to use biological weapons? That crosses a line we've never crossed before. Elena paused in her work. 3 days ago, she would have agreed. Biological warfare was forbidden by every civilized treaty. But 3 days ago, the Empire hadn't murdered 8 million civilians in cold blood. The Empire doesn't recognize our treaties or our moral boundaries, she replied. They see mercy as weakness and restraint as opportunity. If we fight by rules they ignore, we'll lose everything. This conversation was happening across human space. Engineers were designing new weapon systems. Programmers were creating viruses to infiltrate Empire computer networks. Even children were being taught to recognize Empire uniforms and report troop movements. The Empire had expected humans to react like every other conquered species, with fear, submission, and eventual acceptance. Instead, they were watching an entire civilization transform itself into a weapon designed specifically to destroy them. Admiral Torres stood in the war room aboard Earth's orbital command station, studying reports from across human space. The transformation was remarkable and terrifying. In 72 hours, humanity had gone from a peaceful trading civilization to a species focused entirely on warfare. Admiral, the scientists at the Titan Research Station have developed something they're calling a quantum disruptor, reported Intelligence Officer Commander Liu. It interferes with the quantum entanglement drives that power Empire faster than light travel. Torres nodded grimly. What about the biological warfare program? Dr. Vasquez's team has identified 17 different chemical compounds that target specific Empire species. They're working on deployment systems now. The reports kept coming. Mining colonies were producing armor-piercing ammunition. Agricultural worlds were growing crops that could be processed into explosives. Even the luxury resorts had converted their entertainment facilities into training centers for guerrilla warfare. But the most significant development was happening in the outer systems, where human pirates and smugglers had suddenly become humanity's most valuable military assets. These outlaws knew every hidden route, every abandoned station, and every weakness in Empire patrol patterns. Captain Marcus Iron Delacroix had been running contraband through Empire space for 15 years. He knew their procedures, their schedules, and their blind spots better than their own captains. Now his ship, the Shadowhawk, was leading a fleet of converted smuggling vessels on a mission that would change the war. Remember, we go in fast and quiet, Marcus briefed his crew. The Empire thinks their supply depot at Kepler Station is safe because it's 50 light-years behind their front lines. They're about to learn that nowhere is safe from humans with a grudge. The supply depot was massive, containing enough weapons and ammunition to supply a dozen Empire fleets. It was also protected by only a token security force, because the Empire believed humans lacked the capability to strike so deep into their territory. They were wrong. The Shadowhawk and 6 other smuggling ships approached Kepler Station using a route Marcus had discovered years earlier. It required threading between 2 black holes and navigating a field of exotic matter that interfered with sensors. The Empire considered it impassable. Human smugglers called it Tuesday. Depot control, this is cargo vessel Imperial Glory requesting docking clearance. Marcus transmitted, using stolen Empire identification codes. His ship's transponder had been modified to broadcast the identity of a legitimate Empire freighter. Imperial Glory, you are cleared for docking Bay 7. Transmit cargo manifest for inspection. Marcus uploaded a false manifest showing routine supplies while his team prepared for combat. The other ships in his fleet remained hidden in the exotic matter field, waiting for his signal. The plan was simple and brutal. Once inside the station, Marcus's team would disable the security systems and open the docking bays for the rest of the human fleet. They would then systematically destroy every weapon, every supply cache, and every piece of equipment that could be used against human worlds. Docking complete, reported his pilot. Security team is approaching for routine inspection. 3 Empire guards boarded the ship expecting to find routine cargo. Instead, they found Dr. Vasquez's latest creation, a fast-acting neurotoxin that left them unconscious but alive. Killing prisoners served no tactical purpose, and dead guards would trigger security alerts. Phase 1 complete, Marcus whispered into his communicator. Beginning Phase 2. His team moved through the station with surgical precision. They had studied the blueprints for weeks and knew exactly where to place the charges. The Empire's own security cameras showed nothing more than routine maintenance workers going about their business. The real genius of the plan was the timing. Marcus waited until the station's shift change, when half the crew was sleeping and the other half was distracted by routine procedures. When the charges detonated, they didn't destroy the station immediately. Instead, they created a series of system failures that looked like accidents. Life support flickered and died in non-essential sections. Artificial gravity fluctuated. Communication arrays went offline one by one. To the Empire crew, it looked like a cascade of mechanical failures rather than sabotage. Control, this is maintenance. We're reading multiple system failures across Sectors 7 through 15, reported an Empire technician who had no idea that his communication array was actually controlled by the Shadowhawk's computer systems. Understood. Begin emergency protocols and assess damage, came the reply from the station commander, who was too busy coordinating damage control to notice that his security feeds were showing doctored footage. That was when the rest of the human fleet emerged from the exotic matter field. 7 ships against a supply depot with minimal defenses and compromised systems. The battle lasted exactly 14 minutes, but the humans didn't just destroy the depot. They took everything they could carry. Weapons, ammunition, ship components, even the station's computer cores containing intelligence about Empire operations. When they were finished, they left behind a message written in the debris field using pieces of destroyed Empire equipment. You killed 8 million innocents. We remember every name. We remember every face. This is only the beginning. Word of the Kepler Station raid reached Empire Command within hours. A major supply depot, considered completely secure, had been destroyed by human raiders using tactics the Empire didn't understand. The psychological impact was as devastating as the material loss. Emperor Calox himself convened an emergency session of the High Command. The reptilian ruler had conquered half the galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming force. Now he was facing an enemy that ignored conventional military doctrine and seemed to get stronger with each defeat. How did they penetrate 50 light-years into our territory undetected? Demanded the Emperor. General Techmore, the Empire's chief military strategist, consulted his tactical displays. Our intelligence suggests they used routes through hazardous space that our navigation computers classify as impassable. These humans appear to have a much higher tolerance for risk than any species we've encountered. And their tactics? Completely unpredictable, Your Excellence. They don't fight like a military force. They fight like predators hunting prey. The Emperor's scales darkened with anger. Then we will show them what happens to prey that dares to hunt the hunter. Mobilize the 3rd Imperial Fleet. I want every human world burned to ash. But unknown to the Emperor, his communications were being intercepted by human intelligence operatives who had spent years infiltrating Empire systems. The same criminal networks that had made the Kepler raid possible were now providing real-time intelligence about Empire plans. Dr. Vasquez received the intelligence report while working on her latest project. A computer virus specifically designed to target Empire navigation systems. The virus would spread through their communication networks and randomly alter hyperspace coordinates, sending ships to unpredictable locations. The Third Imperial Fleet is moving toward the Sol system, she reported to Admiral Torres. Estimated arrival in 6 days. Torres studied the tactical projections. The Third Fleet consisted of 250 warships, including the super dreadnought Eternal Dominion. It was designed to crush any resistance and establish Empire control over Earth itself. Then we'd better be ready to give them a proper welcome. Earth had never looked more beautiful or more deadly. Every orbital platform had been converted into a weapon station. The moon's surface bristled with railgun batteries that could punch holes through starship hulls at impossible distances. Even the asteroid belt had been transformed into a minefield of hidden threats waiting for the Empire fleet. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the final preparations. In 6 days, humanity had accomplished what military planners said would take 6 months. Every human in the solar system was working toward one goal, making the Empire regret ever hearing the name Earth. Admiral, we're receiving the final reports from the outer system, Commander Liu announced. The asteroid bases are ready. All civilian evacuations are complete. The Mars defense grid is operational. Torres nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the approaching Empire fleet. 250 warships led by the super dreadnought Eternal Dominion. It was the largest force the Empire had ever assembled for a single battle. It still wasn't going to be enough. What's the status of Dr. Vasquez's computer virus? Torres asked. Already deployed, sir. It's been spreading through Empire communication networks for the past 18 hours. We should see the effects when they drop out of hyperspace. The virus was a masterpiece of malicious programming. Instead of simply destroying Empire navigation systems, it would introduce random errors that became worse over time. Ships would think they were in formation when they were actually scattered. Targeting computers would show false readings. Communication arrays would introduce subtle delays that made coordination impossible. But the virus was only the beginning. Hidden throughout the solar system were the fruits of humanity's rapid militarization. Mining ships had been converted into mobile gun platforms. Research stations had become weapons laboratories. Even the luxury space resorts now housed missile batteries and fighter squadrons. The Empire expected to face Earth's small defense fleet in open battle. Instead, they were flying into a carefully prepared trap that would use every piece of technology and every tactical advantage humanity could devise. Captain Sarah. Chen floated in her new command chair aboard the rebuilt Horizon. Her original ship had been destroyed at Proxima Station, but the name lived on in a new vessel designed specifically for this battle. Around her, 43 other ships waited in the shadow of Luna, their crews consisting entirely of survivors from the colony raids. These were the volunteers who had lost everything to the Empire's brutality. They had watched their homes burn, their families die, and their civilizations destroyed. Now they had a chance for revenge, and they were eager to take it. Horizon Squadron, this is Base Command, came Admiral Torres's voice over the communication system. Empire fleet dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're here to teach them that there are consequences for genocide. Sarah checked her weapon systems one final time. The new Horizon carried a mix of human and captured Empire technology, all of it modified for maximum destruction. Her crew had trained for this moment for 6 days straight, learning to operate systems that shouldn't exist and weapons that defied conventional physics. All ships, prepare for combat, Sarah broadcast to her squadron. Today we make sure they remember the name of every person they murdered. The Empire fleet materialized at the edge of the solar system in a display of perfect military precision. 250 ships arranged in classic battle formation, with the massive Eternal Dominion at the center. It should have been an overwhelming show of force. Instead, it was immediately obvious that something was wrong. Admiral Kothvar watched his tactical display with growing confusion. According to his instruments, his fleet was in perfect formation, but the visual displays showed ships scattered across several light minutes of space. Some of his destroyers were reporting communication failures. Others claimed their navigation systems were showing impossible readings. What is our tactical situation? Kothvar demanded. His sensor officer struggled with malfunctioning equipment. Sir, I'm reading. I'm not sure what I'm reading. Our formation appears to be intact, but visual confirmation shows severe displacement. And sir, I'm detecting over 3,000 potential targets throughout the solar system. 3,000 targets was impossible. Earth's entire defense fleet consisted of maybe 50 ships, but the sensors were showing contacts everywhere, hidden in the asteroid belt, lurking behind moons, drifting disguised as space debris. Begin long-range bombardment of the primary world, Kothvar ordered. We'll sort out these sensor ghosts after we complete our primary mission. The Empire fleet opened fire on Earth from maximum range, sending streams of plasma toward the blue-green world. It was a standard intimidation tactic designed to demonstrate overwhelming firepower and force immediate surrender. The plasma beams never reached their target. Hidden throughout the solar system, humanity had built the most sophisticated defense grid in galactic history. Orbital platforms used captured Empire shield technology to create deflector fields that redirected incoming fire. Lunar railguns fired intercept, rounds that broke up plasma streams before they could reach Earth. Even the asteroid belt had been equipped with gravity manipulators that could bend the path of incoming projectiles. But the real surprise came when the human fleet revealed itself. 3,000 contacts resolved into an impossible variety of craft. Military vessels flew alongside converted civilian ships. Captured Empire destroyers operated under human control. Even antique spacecraft from Earth's early space program had been brought out of museums and fitted with modern weapons. Impossible, Kothvar whispered as he watched a spacecraft that looked like it belonged in a history museum destroy one of his frigates with a jury-rigged fusion cannon. The human fleet didn't attack in formation. Instead, they swarmed like angry insects coming from every direction at once. Ships that should have been easy targets proved to have hidden weapons and unexpected capabilities. The converted cruise liner Princess of the Stars launched a spread of antimatter torpedoes that no civilian vessel should have been able to carry. Admiral Torres smiled as he watched the Empire fleet struggle with targets they couldn't predict or counter. All ships execute Maneuver Omega. Time to show them why you don't threaten a predator's home. Maneuver Omega was humanity's answer to superior Empire technology. Instead of trying to match their firepower, the human ships used speed, unpredictability, and sheer audacity to overwhelm Empire defenses. The mining ship Terra's Revenge accelerated to ramming speed and punched through the shield grid of an Empire cruiser. Before the cruiser could respond, the mining ship released its cargo, a hold full of antimatter charges that detonated. Inside the enemy vessel's hull, the research vessel Darwin's Dream used its scientific equipment to scan for weaknesses in Empire armor and transmitted targeting data to every human ship in range. Within minutes, concentrated fire was punching through supposedly impenetrable hull plating. Even the museum ships were proving their worth. The ancient Earth vessel Spirit of Apollo, launched 3 centuries earlier, rammed an Empire destroyer while broadcasting audio recordings of human military marches. The psychological effect on Empire crews was devastating, but the most effective weapon in humanity's arsenal was something the Empire had never encountered: coordinated sacrifice for a greater purpose. When Captain Rodriguez's ship was disabled by Empire fire, he didn't surrender or attempt to escape. Instead, he set his reactor to overload and guided his ship into the middle of an Empire formation. The explosion took out 6 ships and created a debris field that disrupted sensors across the battlefield. Captain Williams followed suit 5 minutes later, using his destroyed ship as a guided missile that shattered the engines of an Empire battle cruiser. Captain Park turned her vessel into a massive shrapnel bomb that disabled an entire squadron. The Empire crews watched in horror as human ships sacrificed themselves, not in desperation, but as carefully planned tactical moves. They had never faced an enemy that treated death in battle as an acceptable cost rather than a defeat to be avoided. Admiral Kothvar realized his fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that shouldn't exist. Civilian ships were fighting like elite military units. Ancient vessels were mounting weapons that surpassed Empire technology. Even the space debris seemed to be actively hostile. "Sir, we've lost over 90 ships," reported his tactical officer. "The humans are using tactics that our computers can't predict or counter." "How many human ships have we destroyed?" 37 confirmed kills, sir. But they keep fighting even when their ships are destroyed. Some of them are ramming our vessels with escape pods. Kothvar's species had conquered dozens of worlds through superior firepower and tactics, but they had never faced an enemy that turned every defeat into a weapon and every loss into motivation for greater violence. The final blow came when Sarah Chen's Horizon Squadron emerged from behind the moon and targeted the Eternal Dominion itself. The super dreadnought was the pride of the Empire fleet, armed with weapons that could destroy planets. It had never faced opponents who had studied its weaknesses for 6 days and modified their weapons specifically to exploit them. The Eternal Dominion was a monument to Empire engineering. 5 kilometers long and armed with enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems, it had never suffered so much as a scratch in 300 years of service. Its shields could deflect the concentrated fire of entire fleets. Its armor could withstand direct hits from stellar-class weapons. None of that mattered against opponents, who had spent 6 days studying every technical specification and designing weapons specifically to kill this one ship. Captain Sarah Chen watched the super dreadnought through her targeting scope as her squadron approached from the moon's shadow. The Eternal Dominion was magnificent and terrible, a floating city dedicated to death and destruction. Today it would learn what those concepts really meant. Horizon Squadron, target the primary resonance frequency of the Dominion's shield grid, Sarah broadcast to her 43 ships. Dr. Vasquez's analysis shows a harmonic weakness at 0.774 terahertz. All ships synchronize weapons to that frequency. The Empire had never shared their technical specifications with conquered species, but they had never faced an enemy with humanity's talent for reverse engineering. Every piece of captured equipment had been analyzed, tested, and understood. Every weakness had been cataloged and exploited. The human ships opened fire simultaneously, their weapons calibrated to create a resonance cascade in the Dominion's shield matrix. Individual shots would have been harmless. Combined and synchronized, they created a feedback loop that tore holes in supposedly impenetrable energy barriers. Admiral Kothvar felt his flagship shudder as the impossible happened. His shield readings showed gaps where none should exist. Human weapons fire was actually penetrating the Eternal Dominion's defenses. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his chief engineer. "Sir, they're using our own shield technology against us. The weapons fire is synchronized to create harmonic interference. It's theoretically possible, but it would require complete knowledge of our shield matrix specifications." Kothvar's blood chilled. Complete knowledge meant the humans had not just captured Empire technology. They had understood it better than the Empire's own engineers. They had found weaknesses that 3 centuries of Empire science had missed. The human attack intensified as more ships joined the assault. The converted mining vessel Persistence used industrial cutting lasers to slice through damaged armor plating. The research ship New Discovery launched probes that attached to the Dominion's hull and began broadcasting the super dreadnought's exact shield frequencies to every human ship in the system. But the most devastating attack came from an unexpected source. The museum ship Spirit of Apollo, 3 centuries old and armed with weapons that should have been obsolete, fired a single projectile at the Dominion's primary reactor. The projectile was humanity's oldest weapon. A simple kinetic round, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. Empire shields were designed to stop energy weapons and modern missiles. They were not designed to stop a chunk of metal moving fast enough to punch through a planet. The round penetrated 17 decks before exploding in the Dominion's engineering section. Secondary explosions rippled through the ship as critical systems failed in cascade. The pride of the Empire fleet was dying, killed by a weapon older than most of the civilizations the Empire had conquered. "Abandon ship," Kothvar ordered as his flagship broke apart around him. "All escape pods launch immediately." But the humans weren't finished with their demonstration. As Empire escape pods ejected from the dying super dreadnought, human ships moved to intercept them. Not to destroy them, but to capture them. Sarah Chen's voice echoed across all frequencies. "Attention Empire survivors. You will be treated according to the laws of war that your Empire refuses to recognize. You will be fed, housed, and given medical care, and then you will be returned to your Empire with a message." The surviving Empire ships watched in confusion as humans risked their own lives to rescue enemies who had come to destroy their world. It violated everything they understood about warfare and conquest. Admiral Torres opened a channel to the retreating Empire fleet. "Admiral Kothvar, I believe you're listening from your escape pod. I want you to carry a message back to your Emperor. Today you learned that humanity cannot be conquered through fear. Every world you burn, every innocent you murder only makes us stronger and more determined. The Admiral's voice carried across the solar system, reaching every ship and every survivor. Tell your Emperor that we didn't start this war, but we will finish it. Tell him that we remember the 8 million souls he murdered, and we will have justice for every one of them. Tell him that humanity is coming, and we will not stop until his empire is ash and his crimes are answered. The surviving Empire ships began retreating toward the edge of the solar system, leaving behind the wreckage of what had been the mightiest fleet in galactic history. 70% of their force was destroyed or disabled. The legendary Eternal Dominion was the expanding cloud of debris. Their most advanced technology had been captured and studied by an enemy that understood it better than they did. But the real defeat was psychological. The Empire had built its power on the fear of overwhelming retaliation. Species surrendered because they believed resistance was hopeless. Now they had been defeated by converted civilian ships and museum pieces, operated by a species that had barely achieved interstellar travel. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the Mo, captured Empire destroyer Retribution's Edge. The ship's computer cores contained intelligence beyond her wildest dreams. Star charts showing the location of every Empire world, technical specifications for their most advanced weapons, and communication protocols that could be used to infiltrate their entire network. The Empire's computer security is surprisingly primitive, she reported to Admiral Torres. They rely on physical isolation rather than encryption. Now that we have access to their network, we can monitor their communications in real time. Torres studied the intelligence reports flowing in from the captured systems. What about their military capabilities? Impressive but inflexible, sir. They have superior firepower and stronger ships, but their tactics haven't evolved in centuries. They're not prepared for asymmetric warfare, or opponents who adapt faster than their doctrine can be updated. The intelligence painted a picture of an empire that had grown complacent through centuries of easy victories. They had never faced serious resistance, never been forced to innovate, never encountered an enemy that treated warfare as a problem to be solved rather than a ritual to be performed. Meanwhile, in the outer system, Captain Marcus Delacroix was leading a salvage operation that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. His team of former smugglers and pirates were systematically stripping every useful component from the destroyed Empire ships. "Look at this beauty," Marcus called out as his crew extracted an intact hyperspace drive from a disabled cruiser. "With some modifications, we could install this in a cargo hauler and have the fastest ship in human space." The salvage operation was recovering enough advanced technology to upgrade the entire human fleet. Shield generators, weapon systems, armor plating, and computer cores were being integrated into human ships as fast as engineers could install them. But the most valuable discovery was something unexpected. Hidden in the Eternal Dominion's secure database was a complete list of Empire atrocities: conquered worlds, enslaved populations, and genocide campaigns spanning millennia. "Admiral, you need to see this," Dr. Vasquez transmitted from her laboratory. "The Empire hasn't just committed genocide against humans. They've done this to dozens of species over the past 1,000 years. We're looking at evidence of systematic extermination campaigns across half the galaxy." Torres felt his anger transform into something colder and more determined. The Empire wasn't just humanity's enemy. They were a threat to every thinking being in the galaxy. Every species that had ever shown independence or resistance had been marked for elimination. "Release this information to every communication network in the galaxy," Torres ordered. "Let every species know what the Empire really is. Let them see the evidence of their crimes." The intelligence release triggered a galactic communications cascade that reached every civilized world within hours. Species that had considered the Empire a necessary evil learned they were marked for eventual extermination. Worlds that had accepted Empire protection discovered they were actually living under the rule of genocidal maniacs. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Rebellion broke out on a dozen worlds simultaneously. Empire garrison forces found themselves facing uprisings by populations they had considered pacified. Trade routes collapsed as species refused to cooperate with known genocidal regimes, but the Empire's response was predictable and brutal. Instead of trying to contain the rebellions through negotiation or reform, they chose to demonstrate their power through even greater atrocities. Emperor Kalox personally ordered the sterilization of 3 rebel worlds as an example to others. 2 billion sentient beings died in orbital bombardments designed to terrorize survivors into submission. The plan backfired spectacularly. Instead of fear, the massacres created rage. Instead of submission, they inspired resistance. Every species that had ever shown independence or resistance had been marked for elimination. Release this information to every communication network in the galaxy, Torres ordered. Let every species know what the Empire really is. Let them see the evidence of their crimes. The intelligence release triggered a galactic communications cascade that reached every civilized world within hours. Species that had considered the Empire a necessary evil learned they were marked for eventual extermination. Worlds that had accepted Empire protection discovered they were actually living under the rule of genocidal maniacs. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Rebellion broke out on a dozen worlds simultaneously. Empire garrison forces found themselves facing uprisings by populations they had considered pacified. Trade routes collapsed as species refused to cooperate with known genocidal regimes. But the Empire's response was predictable and brutal. Instead of trying to contain the rebellions through negotiation or reform, they chose to demonstrate their power through even greater atrocities. Emperor Kalox personally ordered the sterilization of 3 rebel worlds as an example to others. 2 billion sentient beings died in orbital bombardments, designed to terrorize survivors into submission. The plan backfired spectacularly. Instead of fear, the massacres created rage. Instead of submission, they inspired resistance. Every species in the galaxy now understood that cooperation with the Empire meant eventual extermination. Humanity found itself at the center of a galactic uprising that they had never planned or expected. Their victory at Earth had demonstrated that the Empire could be defeated. Their intelligence release had shown that the Empire must be defeated. Species that had never heard of humans began sending representatives to Earth. Ancient civilizations that had accepted Empire rule for centuries started planning coordinated resistance. Even the Empire's own client species began questioning their allegiance to a regime that had marked them for eventual extermination. Admiral Torres stood in the command center, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. Humanity had started this war to avenge 8 million murdered civilians. Now they found themselves leading a galactic coalition against the greatest evil the universe had ever known. The Empire had made a critical error when they chose to demonstrate their power through mass murder. They had created an enemy that could not be negotiated with, could not be intimidated, and would not stop until justice was served. The war was no longer about human survival. It was about the survival of every free species in the galaxy, and humanity intended to see it through to the very end. The Galactic Council had not convened an emergency session in over 2 centuries. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the ancient meeting hall on neutral Cygnus Station, their voices creating a cacophony of anger, fear, and desperate hope. At the center of it all sat Admiral Marcus Torres, representing a species most of them had barely heard of 6 months ago. The Empire claims these documents are fabricated, declared Ambassador Veltar of the Hegemony, her crystalline form shimmering with nervous energy. How do we know humans haven't created false evidence to justify their war? Torres gestured to the holographic displays surrounding the council chamber. Ambassador, these files came directly from the Eternal Dominion's secure database. The encryption, methods, the data structures, even the linguistic patterns are unmistakably Empire in origin. More importantly, your own intelligence services can verify the atrocities described here. The evidence was overwhelming. Empire records detailing the systematic extermination of the Kethamori civilization, plans for the sterilization of worlds that showed technological independence, genetic modification programs designed to make subject species more docile and compliant. The Zephyrian Liberation War, Torres continued, reading from the captured files. Empire records show they deliberately introduced a plague that killed 90% of your population, then blamed it on natural causes to justify increased oversight. The Great Silence of Sector 7 wasn't a communication breakdown. It was the systematic elimination of 3 species that had formed a trade alliance. Murmurs of shock and outrage rippled through the chamber. Species that had blamed natural Disasters and random misfortunes for their tragedies were learning that they had been deliberate victims of genocide. But not everyone was convinced that war was the answer. Even if these accusations are true, said Council Speaker Thane of the Republic, the Empire controls half the galaxy. Their military forces outnumber the combined fleets of every other species by a factor of 10. What you're proposing isn't liberation. It's suicide. Torres stood, his presence commanding attention from beings who had ruled star systems before humans had learned to use fire. Speaker Thane, 6 months ago the Empire murdered 8 million of my people in a single day. They did it to demonstrate their power and our helplessness. Today, that same Empire is retreating from human space with 70% casualties and their flagship destroyed. You fought one battle against a single fleet, Thane replied dismissively. The Empire has thousands of fleets and unlimited resources. Then let me show you something else, Torres said, activating a new set of displays. These are real-time intelligence reports from the past 72 hours. Empire forces are being withdrawn from 14 sectors to deal with uprisings. Their production facilities are reporting sabotage incidents every 6 hours. 3 of their client species have declared independence. The displays showed a galaxy in turmoil. The intelligence release had triggered exactly what Torres had hoped. 4. A coordinated uprising by every species that had suffered under Empire rule. The Empire's greatest strength has always been their ability to face one enemy at a time, Torres explained. They conquer through divide and conquer, keeping potential enemies isolated and afraid. But now every species in the galaxy knows they're marked for eventual extermination. The Empire is facing their worst nightmare, a unified opposition. Ambassador Zekathara of the Trading Federation leaned forward, her insectoid features unreadable. And what role do humans propose to play in this uprising? You have fewer than 100 worlds and a primitive industrial base. Torres smiled grimly. Ambassador, we don't have the largest fleet or the most advanced technology, but we have something the Empire has never encountered, the ability to turn anything into a weapon when sufficiently motivated. He activated another display showing human military production statistics. In 6 months, we've converted our entire civilization into a war machine. Mining operations are producing armor-piercing ammunition. Agricultural worlds are growing explosive precursors. Our research stations are developing weapons the Empire doesn't know how to counter. The numbers were staggering. Humanity had achieved a production rate that shouldn't have been possible for a species with their limited resources. Every human facility had been converted to military use. Every citizen was contributing to the war effort. But our real contribution isn't industrial, Torres continued. It's tactical. We've proven that Empire forces can be defeated through unconventional warfare. We've shown that their technology can be captured and used against them. Most importantly, we've demonstrated that species fighting for survival are more dangerous than professional soldiers fighting for pay. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. Every species in the chamber had lost something to the Empire's systematic brutality. They had endured centuries of oppression, believing resistance was hopeless. Now, they had proof that the Empire could be defeated and evidence that they had no choice but to fight. The Galactic Liberation Alliance was born that day, uniting 47 species in a coordinated war against the Empire. It was the largest military coalition in galactic history, and it was led by a species that had barely achieved interstellar flight. But while politicians debated, human forces were already implementing the next phase of their strategy. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Retribution, watching her fleet prepare for Operation Nemesis. Her task force consisted of 60 ships, half human vessels, half captured Empire technology operated by volunteers from a dozen different species. Captain, all ships report ready for hyperspace insertion, announced her tactical officer, a former Empire navigation specialist who had defected after learning about the Genocide files. Sarah nodded, studying the target coordinates. Deep inside, Empire space lay the industrial complex of Forge Prime, a massive facility that produced 30% of the Empire's military equipment. It was defended by 3 full fleets and considered absolutely impregnable. It was also exactly the kind of target that would prove the Alliance could strike anywhere. All ships, Initiate jump. Remember, we're not trying to hold territory. We're here to send a message and acquire intelligence. Hit hard, hit fast, and get out before they can organize a response. The human fleet vanished into hyperspace, carrying with them technology and tactics the Empire had never encountered. They were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for justice, and that made them infinitely more dangerous. Meanwhile, in the deepest levels of the Empire capital, Emperor Calox convened his own emergency council. The reptilian ruler's scales had darkened to an angry crimson as he listened to reports of rebellion and military defeats. How did this happen? He demanded of his advisors. 6 months ago, these humans were a minor nuisance on the galactic periphery. Now they're leading a coalition that threatens the entire Empire. General Thekmore, scarred from decades of conquest campaigns, consulted his reports nervously. Your Excellence, the humans fight differently than any species we've encountered. They don't follow conventional military doctrine. They adapt their tactics faster than our forces can respond. Most critically, they seem to grow stronger with each defeat rather than weaker. Then we will show them the true meaning of defeat, Calox snarled. Mobilize the core fleets. I want every human world burned to cinders. I want their species extinct within the year. Sir, our intelligence suggests that attacking human worlds directly may trigger an even stronger response. These beings appear to have an unusual attachment to their civilian populations. Calox's laugh was like breaking glass. Then we will turn that attachment into a weakness. If they care so much about their civilians, they will surrender to protect them. But the Emperor was making the same mistake that had started this war. He was assuming that humans would react to mass murder with fear and submission. He was about to learn that threatening to kill human civilians was the fastest way to turn every human into an implacable enemy. As the Empire's core fleets began mobilizing for what they called the final solution to the human problem, human intelligence networks were already tracking their movements. Dr. Vasquez's computer viruses had infected Empire communication systems so thoroughly that humans often knew about Empire plans before Empire commanders did. The stage was set for the largest space battle in galactic history. On one side, the combined might of the Empire's most elite forces, determined to end the human threat through overwhelming violence. On the other, a species that had learned to turn every defeat into victory and every loss into motivation for greater resistance. The Empire was about to discover why cornering a predator species was the worst decision in the history of warfare. They had started this conflict by murdering 8 million innocents. Humanity was going to finish it by ensuring such atrocities could never happen again. The Battle of Forge Prime lasted exactly 17 minutes. By the time Empire reinforcements arrived, Captain Sarah Chen's task force had destroyed the industrial complex, captured its computer cores, and vanished back into hyperspace. Behind them, they left a facility that had taken decades to build, reduced to expanding plasma and debris. More importantly, they left a message broadcast on every Empire frequency. For the 8 million souls of New Terra, for every innocent murdered by Imperial decree, for every species silenced by Imperial brutality. This is justice, and it will not stop until every crime is answered. Emperor Calox watched the footage of his most secure facility burning and felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of rule. Fear. Not fear of death or defeat, but fear that his empire was facing an enemy that could not be controlled, predicted or defeated through conventional means. Your Excellence, the core fleets are ready for deployment, reported Admiral Sekthor, the Empire's most experienced military commander. 1,500 ships of the line, including 7 super dreadnoughts. Once we eliminate the human homeworld, their resistance will collapse. Calox studied the tactical displays showing the largest fleet in Empire history. It should have been enough to conquer any 10 species simultaneously. Against the humans, he was no longer certain it would be enough. What intelligence do we have on their current fleet strength? Approximately 300 ships of various classes, Your Excellence. However, their exact capabilities remain unclear. They continue to field vessels that our computers classify as impossible. The intelligence reports made disturbing reading. Human ships seem to violate physical laws on a regular basis. Civilian vessels mounted weapons that belonged on military dreadnoughts. Ancient museum pieces outperformed modern Empire destroyers. Most troubling of all, human fleets seemed to get more effective as they took casualties rather than less. Deploy the core fleets to the Sol system, Kalox ordered. If these humans want a war of extermination, we will show them what that truly means. But unknown to the Emperor, his orders were being intercepted by human intelligence operatives who had spent months infiltrating Empire communication networks. Dr. Vasquez's computer viruses had evolved into something far more sophisticated, a complete surveillance system that gave humans real-time access to Empire military planning. Admiral Torres received the intelligence report while reviewing the final preparations for Operation Ragnarok. The human response to the Empire's planned extermination fleet was characteristically direct. They would meet it head-on in the solar system and demonstrate once and for all that some enemies could not be intimidated into submission. 1,500 ships, Torres mused as he studied the tactical projections. Against our current fleet strength of... How many operational vessels do we have now? 437 ships, sir, reported Commander Liu. Including vessels from our allied species and captured Empire technology. The number should have been discouraging. Even with their allies, the human fleet was outnumbered more than 3-1 by the most elite forces in the Empire's arsenal. But Torres was smiling as he reviewed the battle plan. Commander, what's the status of Project Prometheus? Complete, sir. Dr. Vasquez's team has finished installing the quantum disruptors in every ship in the fleet. The Empire's faster-than-light drives will be completely inoperative within the disruption field. Project Prometheus was humanity's answer to the Empire's numerical superiority. Instead of trying to match their firepower, the human fleet would trap the Empire forces in normal space and force them to fight on human terms. The quantum disruptors were based on captured Empire technology, but modified in ways that their original designers had never imagined. When activated, they would create a field that made hyperspace travel impossible for any ship caught within it. The Empire fleet would arrive expecting a quick victory and find themselves trapped in a battle they couldn't escape. What about the other preparations? The Sol system is ready, sir. Every asteroid, every piece of space debris, every derelict satellite has been converted into a weapon platform. The enemy will face defensive fire from directions they don't even know exist. The transformation of the solar system was perhaps humanity's greatest achievement. In less than a year, they had turned their home into the most heavily fortified location in galactic history. Every moon bristled with railgun batteries. The asteroid belt had become a minefield of hidden weapons platforms. Even Earth's orbital garbage dumps had been converted into swarms of kinetic interceptors. But the real surprise was waiting in the outer system, where Marcus Delacroix led a fleet of modified smuggling vessels and captured Empire ships. These were the wolves that would harry the Empire fleet, using hit-and-run tactics to create chaos in their formations. Remember, we're not trying to fight fair, Marcus briefed his squadron of former pirates and smugglers. We're here to make them angry, confused, and scattered. Use every dirty trick you know, and when you run out of tricks, make up new ones. The Empire's core fleets arrived at the edge of the solar system in perfect formation, a display of military precision that should have intimidated any rational enemy. 1,500 ships arranged in classic battle order, with the 7 super dreadnoughts, forming an impregnable center and destroyer screens protecting the flanks. Admiral Sekthor watched his tactical displays with satisfaction. The human fleet was exactly where intelligence had predicted, arranged in defensive positions around their homeworld, like a species preparing for a last stand. Begin long-range bombardment, Sekthor ordered. Target their orbital installations first, then move to planetary bombardment. I want this over quickly. The Empire fleet opened fire from maximum range, sending streams of plasma toward Earth's orbital defenses. It was a standard tactic designed to destroy enemy fortifications before closing for the final assault. The plasma streams never reached their targets. Hidden throughout the solar system, humanity had deployed quantum disruptor fields that activated the moment the Empire fleet fired their first shots. Suddenly, 1,500 Empire ships found themselves trapped in normal space, unable to retreat or maneuver using their faster-than-light drives. But that was only the beginning of their problems. The human fleet didn't respond with return fire. Instead, they began broadcasting on every frequency the Empire used, filling their communication channels with a sound that made every Empire crew members' blood run cold. The names of the 8 million civilians murdered at New Terra. Sarah Martinez, age 7, killed in the New Terra massacre, came the first voice clear and steady over the combat frequencies. Thomas Chen, age 43, killed in the New Terra massacre, came the second. Maria Volkov, age 19, killed in the New Terra massacre, came the third. For 8 hours, human voices read the names of every single person who had died in the Empire's opening atrocity. 8 million names, spoken by the friends and families of the dead. It was psychological warfare on a scale the Empire had never imagined possible. But while the Empire crews listened to the litany of their crimes, the human fleet was moving. Ships emerged from hidden positions throughout the solar system, each one broadcasting the names of the dead while targeting Empire vessels with weapons designed specifically to counter their technology. The mining ship Persistence, now armed with quantum torpedoes, spoke the names of 1,000 dead children while systematically destroying an Empire destroyer squadron. The research vessel Darwin's Dream broadcast the identities of murdered scientists, while using captured Empire computers to hack into enemy navigation systems. Admiral Sekthor watched his perfectly ordered formation dissolve into chaos as human ships attacked from every direction at once. His numerical superiority meant nothing when the enemy could strike from any position and retreat into hiding before his forces could respond. "Sir, we're taking heavy casualties," reported his tactical officer. "The humans are using our own technology against us, but modified in ways our computers can't predict." "How many ships have we lost?" 237 destroyed or disabled, sir. But we've only confirmed kills on 41 human vessels. The exchange ratio was devastating. The Empire was losing ships at nearly 6-1 against an enemy that should have been overwhelmed in minutes. More importantly, every Empire ship that died was irreplaceable, while the humans seemed to have an unlimited supply of vessels converted from civilian craft. The turning point came when Captain Chen's task force emerged from behind Jupiter and engaged the Empire's super dreadnoughts directly. These massive ships were the backbone of Empire military power, armed with enough firepower to destroy planets, and defended by shields that had never been penetrated. But the humans had spent months studying the wreckage of the Eternal Dominion, learning every weakness and vulnerability in super dreadnought design. They attacked not with overwhelming force, but with surgical precision, targeting specific systems in a coordinated pattern that caused catastrophic cascade failures. The super dreadnought Inevitable Conquest died first, its reactor core breaching after pinpoint strikes disabled its cooling systems. The Endless Victory followed minutes later, torn apart by internal explosions triggered by modified mining charges. Within an hour, all seven super dreadnoughts were either destroyed or drifting powerless in space. Admiral Sekthor realized his core fleets were facing complete annihilation. The humans weren't just winning, they were demonstrating that the Empire's most elite forces were helpless against opponents who fought with intelligence instead of raw power. "All ships attempt to retreat to minimum safe distance," he ordered desperately. But the quantum disruptors made retreat impossible. The Empire fleet was trapped in the solar system until the human fleet chose to let them go. And the humans were making it clear that surrender was the only way any Empire crew would leave alive. "Attention Empire forces," came Admiral Torres' voice over all frequencies. "You came here to commit genocide. You came here to finish what you started at New Terra. Today you learned that some crimes cannot go unpunished." The broadcast reached not just the Empire fleet, but every communication network in the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species watched as humanity's small fleet systematically destroyed the largest military force in galactic history. "To every species watching this battle," Torres continued, "this is what justice looks like. This is what happens when those who commit genocide face the consequences of their actions. The Empire's reign of terror ends today." The Battle of Sol lasted 18 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Empire's core fleets. Of 1,500 ships, fewer than 100 escaped to carry word of the defeat back to the Empire capital. The psychological impact was immediate and total. Species across the galaxy that had lived in fear of Empire retaliation suddenly realized that their oppressors were not invincible. Rebellions that had simmered for decades exploded into open warfare. Empire garrison forces found themselves facing uprising by populations they had considered thoroughly pacified. Within a week, the Empire had lost control of over half their territory. Within a month, their capital world was under siege by a coalition fleet led by human vessels and flying the banner of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Emperor Calox died when human commandos stormed his palace, still refusing to believe that his mighty empire could fall to a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. His last words were a question that would be remembered by historians for millennia. How did they do it? The answer was simple, though the Empire had never understood it. Humanity had something that no amount of technology or firepower could overcome: the absolute refusal to accept that some evils could not be stopped. The war that began with the murder of 8 million innocents ended with the liberation of half the galaxy. The Empire's territories were divided among the species they had oppressed, with humanity serving as mediators to ensure that former victims did not become new oppressors. The memorial to the 8 million was built in orbit around New Terra, its names written in the languages of every species that had suffered under Empire rule. It served as a reminder that justice delayed is not justice denied, and that some crimes are so terrible that they demand total recompense. Humanity emerged from the war as the reluctant leaders of a new galactic order based on cooperation rather than conquest. They had proven that a species fighting for justice was more powerful than any empire built on fear and oppression. The Empire's final broadcast had announced the death of 8 million humans. History would remember it as the moment that sparked the liberation of 8 billion beings across the galaxy. Sometimes the smallest acts of evil awaken the greatest forces for good. The Empire learned that lesson too late to save themselves, but not too late to save everyone else.